I just found this article on MSNBC, right? And I'm on there basically every single day. And I don't get on there for news. It's the last place you would ever in a million years go for actual news. But I get on there, really just to see what our fellow citizens, our fellow victims of propaganda really do believe. Or I guess a better way to put that, I get on there to see what they're expected to believe. Because some of this stuff, man, I don't care who you are. Other than maybe the people who are well paid to write it and say it, I don't see how anyone could actually believe a lot of this stuff. And this gender topic is one of those topics, man. I generally try to stay away from it on this channel. It's so divisive, especially, when it involves innocent kids. It's probably the most disturbing thing imaginable to talk about, which is probably why we should talk about it more, because if any one issue has the ability to destroy Western culture, my money's on this one. I think this is it. But YouTube seems to be pretty sensitive on this whole topic and basically all potential culture destroying topics. And I'm still kind of learning how far I can push that. But that said, I thought that this article had to be shared, and less for topic really, and more just to illustrate how their lazy propaganda really works, man. So I'll get into it, right? So first of all, it's called How Mike Johnson Infuriated the Anti-Trans Right. Hardline anti-trans Republicans were incensed to see many of their core propositions fail in the recent government funding fight. So, in this, hold on to your britches, man. Over the last couple years, trans people in the U.S. have been beaten down by anti-trans conservative state legislation, with dozens of states heavily restricting trans life, particularly for the youth. What does that even mean, man? Anti-trans conservative state legislation restricting trans life, especially for the youth. I mean, this is how this propaganda works. I mean, they plant these little seeds. They put all the right buzzwords together, conservative and anti-trans and youth. And they just expect the reader's own confirmation bias to just take over. And of course, our confirmation biases, they've been established by the last 2,000 inaccurate articles and statements just like this. So people read this and they see it as almost proof that there's anti-trans legislation targeting youth. No proof, just words, and it just fuels them, man. It just stacks up on the last 10 times they've heard it. And it's just not the case. I mean, the truth is protecting minors or anyone else who cannot meaningfully consent to any life-altering, irreversible decisions, especially ones based on the expertise of a medical industry that stands to profit from them, that's not anti-anything. I mean, it's just not. But anyway, it goes on. With President Joe Biden in office and Democrats narrowly holding down the Senate, trans people in the U.S. have at least had a reprieve at the federal level. That break, however, was recently put into question. At the state level, restricting trans life has become one of the chief conservative policy goals. They still never quantify what restricting trans life even means. Alongside, of course, the access to abortion. Yeah, you got to loop those in there. They got to be together. And some Republicans in Congress were hoping for their first big policy win federally in negotiations over the massive $1.2 trillion budget deal that just passed Congress. Republicans pushed hard to add dozens of anti-trans riders. Proposals that included everything from barring federal funds from going to hospital systems that give puberty blockers to minors. I don't see a problem with that, which is essentially banning such blockers nationwide, to blocking federal funding for any form of gender-affirming care at any age. These bans would have rolled trans health back several decades. Again, man, I mean, when they say things like restricting trans life, obviously this is not by accident. They expect you to read that and to think that people's lives are actually at risk. And if you don't allow them access to drugs and procedures, life-altering, irreversible drugs and procedures before they can even buy a pack of cigarettes legally, then that is a danger to their life. And it's the same thing as genocide, you'll hear the left say, which really is exactly what they want you to believe. And if they can frame it that way and get you thinking along those lines, later in the paragraph when they tell you that evil Republicans don't want federal dollars going to hospitals that essentially prey on children, you'll be pissed off and it'll work. You'll take that to mean Republicans are actually attacking children. And you won't think about it logically, which I'll admit, obviously, if you're reading MSNBC for anything other than sport, you're probably not going to be thinking too logically anyway. But if you do think about it logically, I mean, you probably wonder on what planet is it acceptable for your tax dollars to fund the potential destruction of someone else's child's life, right? How does that even make sense? And it doesn't. And then they go on to say that, taking federal funding out of trans healthcare would set it back decades. Well, how's that? How does that even make sense? And if that's the case, how many gender affirmations have we been paying for already? I think that if we're paying for it, we probably deserve to know. But luckily, it's not all clown world. In some states, they've actually elected some state representatives that have a backbone and can actually see what's really going on. It's not just evil, greedy insurrection Republicans fighting to protect children either.
A dozen Democrats crossed the aisle Thursday to help pass a ban on gender reassignment surgery for minors. Peterborough progressive Jonah Wheeler saying he doesn't see the benefit in allowing kids under 18 to undergo this kind of life-altering procedure.
I will fight until my very last day, until they are recognized as human beings. The question before us is whether or not children under the age of 18 should be able to get these surgeries. And I, despite being a liberal who believes in those human rights, do not think that is the case.
Opponents of the bill, including Jerry Cannon, one of the state's first openly transgender lawmakers, say this ban could cause harm.
It's not right for New Hampshire. It's not right for the transgender community. And I hope that our young people don't take this message badly, because I'm concerned about the health of many young transgender people.
Backers of the bill say they commiserate with trans youth and their families.
It's hard. Nobody denies that. But being told something is safe and effective when there's no data and they're just trying to figure out how it works on you is not compassionate. It's not kind.
The bill now heads to the state Senate. LGBTQ rights activists call this a dark day at the New Hampshire State House. They're hoping this bill can be stopped, if necessary, by the governor's veto pen.
I'm optimistic that Governor Sununu will follow in the footsteps of Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and veto legislation that's harmful to transgender people in New Hampshire.
In Concord, Adam Sexton, WMUR News 9.
Couple things there, man. That young progressive Democrat guy named Jonah Wheeler, I got to say, pretty impressive young guy. He got elected when he was only 19 years old. So he's either a wonderful example of what's to come in the Democrat Party, or I think more likely, he's just a lot more intelligent than the average Democrat, and he's wising up a whole lot faster than the usual politician of any kind. And that Republican representative you saw, I think she had a fantastic and completely logical argument. And I don't know why, but federal representation does not seem to think and talk like this. I mean, I wish they could be this eloquent. I mean, she basically says, look, I get it. It's tough. But the people who are telling you that these things are safe and effective, they're lying to you because you're the actual guinea pig. Those are not compassionate people. And I'm telling you, man, in my book, she's right. They may as well be Mengele himself. I mean, there is no difference. And I'll get back to the article in a moment, but I want to show you more of this young Democrat, man, because it is so rare to see any politician, but especially a Democrat, especially a progressive Democrat, go against the party and do what they believe is the right thing to do. And I think that's pretty noteworthy. If we don't show more of it, we're probably not going to see more of it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that reminder. I rise today despite the uncomfortability of this vote, because for me, it comes down to whether or not kids should be able to get these surgeries. And despite the fact that I am a liberal, despite the fact that I believe in non-discrimination for trans people, for gay people, for queer people, and that I will fight until my very last day, until they are recognized as human beings. The question before us is whether or not children under the age of 18 should be able to get these surgeries. And I, despite being a liberal who believes in those human rights, do not think that is the case. And when the question is put before me, and I spoke to people until 11:30 last night, lobbyists, different stakeholders, people with firsthand experience, lived experience, and I've been speaking to people for the last 4 weeks about this bill, the only argument against it being that this opens the amendment specifically opens the door to other bad trans bills. But folks, the slippery slope fallacy I don't think applies here. We're talking about whether or not kids should get these surgeries, and they should not. These are irreversible surgeries. And despite the fact that there are
He's absolutely right, man. And I know it is a slippery slope. Yeah, we hate those slippery slope arguments. They are pretty lame. But if anything is a slippery slope, this is it, man. And the left, they really are the ones pushing us as close to the edge as we possibly can be without going over, right? And this is obviously a pretty smart guy. And my gut tells me that he is going to end up a conservative because the guy basically has normal human sense of morality and he's got some common sense. And another thing I found out about reading about the guy, he's completely out on Joe Biden. I'd love to hear some stories on why that is. I'm trying to find more of this guy, but he's already endorsed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I'm thinking, my gut tells me he is not the same guy who was elected at 19. And if he continues his awakening, if he stays in that party, he is going to change that party.
are medical exceptions, which are included in this amendment. When people have problems with their genitals that need to be addressed, that should be addressed. But when we're talking about whether or not kids should get these surgeries, I think that goes a bridge too far, and I will not be signing on to that. So I will be supporting this amendment, and I appreciate the work done in the Health and Human Services Committee. They worked very diligently, and if you want to watch legislating being done in real time in a really good way, I would recommend that you watch the committee hearings on this bill, the work session on this legislation, because they diligently took all people into account, they took all experiences into account, and they came up with a legislation that protects children under the age of 18. This is not a question of whether or not you're with the trans community. This is a question on whether or not you believe children should be able to get these irreversible surgeries. So again, despite being a Democrat, despite being a liberal who believes in human rights, I don't think that children should be able to get these irreversible surgeries. So I'll take all the heat that comes from this. I will be voting for this amendment and for OTPA if it passes. The bill in its original form I think is too broad, and I won't be voting for OTP, but I will be voting for OTPA if the bill passes and for the amendment if it passes. And I hope all of you on this side of the aisle who definitely believe in human rights, who believe in protecting non-discrimination, would consider the irreversible surgeries that kids are going to be getting if this bill does not pass. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I urge you to join me in supporting this amendment.
What can you say? I mean, that is a pretty impressive young man, and this is exactly the kind of leadership, exactly the kind of people that we need. I mean, especially when it comes to issues like this, man, because really, I mean, protecting kids from all things should be something that we can all agree on, man. I've said it before on this channel. If we cannot agree on the welfare of children, if we cannot agree that the books in their library should be age appropriate and not a ban, if we can't agree that kids literally are the most important asset that we have in the country, then I do not see how it is at all possible, at all, ever, to agree on any of the comparatively small things, because everything is a small thing when you're comparing it to the welfare of kids. I mean, and it's freaking wild, man. The people have their minds so warped by articles like this and by narratives like this that, you know, they're so twisted by these people that they actually believe that none of this stuff is even happening. You know, the same people somehow believe at the same time that kids are not getting surgeries or medications, but at the same time they believe that if it is happening, it's rare. And that of all those rare occurrences, if there are any, the delta between lives saved and lives destroyed is somehow an acceptable number. And I'm sorry, man, but if the risk is just one kid's life destroyed, then there has got to be a more reasonable, more effective, and more compassionate way to save the young lives that need saving. And I'll just say this, man, to the people who believe that it's not happening, then why are we even having this argument, right? What is the point of articles like this if it's not even happening? But I'll keep going. Fortunately, only one rider, a ban on using federal funds to fly pride flags at U.S. embassies and military installations, successfully found its way into the final version of the bill. Some LGBTQ advocates, I think they forgot a couple letters there, it was supposed to be IA and then a plus. They got tired of adding letters, so you got to have the plus. If you put in the plus, we don't have to have all the extra letters. But anyway, LGBTQ advocates were disappointed in the Biden administration and Democrats for giving in on the flag ban rider during negotiations. But with many, likely worse proposals on the line, the compromise should be seen as a win overall for queer and especially trans people in the U.S. Flying pride flags at overseas government facilities has typically been a way for the U.S. to signal its openness to queer lives to the world, especially in countries that still criminalize LGBTQ lives, often with the political funding from American evangelicals. All right. That's rich, man. I mean, basically, where do you go? Let's start at the top. I mean, basically, they're advocating for flying the pride flag above American embassies. They're talking about Muslim nations. That's what they're talking about here. And I don't think the left realizes this, but embassies, they're a part of our diplomatic mission. That is their purpose. And nothing says diplomacy quite like flying offensive and potentially illegal flags in foreign nations. You know, I mean, what are these people talking about, right? How is that even up for consideration, right? And the best part, they say American evangelicals are funding the criminalizing of LGBTQ lives in foreign countries. And I got to stop. That is dangerous, man. There are victimized people who will read that kind of crap and believe it. And if you ever wondered why the modern day American left isn't just against Christianity, but they seem to actually despise Christians themselves. And if you ever wondered why, this is why. You know, they read trash like that, man. And without any supportive facts, they believe it. And they believe that American Christians are the reason that homosexuality is illegal in basically all of Africa, basically all of the Middle East, except for the one country the left hates, which is Israel, and a couple random places like Jamaica and Ghana and Grenada. And don't forget, of course, the left's new favorite fictional country, Palestine, where if you're gay, you're most likely to get helped off a roof the quick way. And that's happened a bunch of times. And they don't care about that. But anyway, people who believe this article will believe that American Christians are funding these places. And I promise you, the only Americans funding these places are the American government with your money and my money. Money that the left, at least for the next 8 months, is in complete and total control of. But anyway, the article goes on like that, man. It's just nothing but misleading propaganda after misleading propaganda. And I just want to show you guys, because this is what we're up against, man. People will believe what they're told to believe. And they don't even require proof anymore, if they ever did. I don't know. All they need now is to repeat certain things enough times, and it becomes true. And in the case of some of this stuff, you know, 1,000 different leftists or MSNBC victims are going to read it 3,000 different ways. And it's amazing, man. When I see this stuff, I feel like we're totally screwed. I'm not sure how we fight this. I'm not sure how we help those people, but we have got to find a way, man. But that's just my take, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.